I invite you to join me in Revelation chapter 2 today. We're talking about habits. One way that we can talk about that is this: small decisions over a period of time that produce big results. Sometimes we don't think that the smallest of habits really make that big a difference. And if you only think about it one time or two times, it may not feel like that's a big deal. But over the course of time, these small decisions, these what may feel like small habits, can produce large results because of the compounding nature of it. We all have habits, don't we? We all have them. Some we want to have, some we don't. Some of them we want to get rid of, and we make a commitment every year. I'm going to stop doing this. And we won't have a show of hands of how many of us have already failed at that. But we're going to talk today about one habit that we need. One habit that we need is the habit of love. And so the truth for today is this: love first, so love will last. Love first, so love will last. So let me ask you this question. Have you ever done everything right only to discover that you were wrong? You know, you've done everything right, and then you did something wrong. Well, let me show you a picture of somebody that did something right, but now everything turned out wrong. I was in 6th grade at this time. Yeah. That was a beautiful moment right there. I had the mom haircut and the braces, and so that went a long way right there. Hang on, I need some therapy. Hang on. Hold on. No. So I was in 6th grade, and we were trying out for chair placements in band. And so I had the piece of music ahead of time like everybody did. I'd been working on it every day. I was working on it. I worked on it after school. I worked on it at home. I worked on it all this time. And it was great. I mean, I had it down. It sounded a little strange to me, but you know, whatever. This is just the piece of music it is, and that's awesome. And so, man, I was ready to nail it. I wanted to be first chair. I was going to be first chair. I had something to prove. We had just moved into the community, and so, you know, I had to prove something. And so we're sitting there, and here's the kicker. We didn't try out only in front of the teacher. This was in band class, and so he said, all right, it's this section's turn. And so the first one played it, and then the second one played it, and then it was my turn to play it. And I began to consider something because I listened to how they played it. And I thought, now that sounds different. That sounds odd. They must be playing it wrong. You know, I had a little bit of an ego. I had some pride issues that had nothing to do with being an only adopted child. I was just having some things going on in my life. And so I thought, well, you know, hey, I'm going to show them, man, I've got this right. And so as I opened up the book and I began to look at the music, there was one thing I had failed to notice. This particular piece of music did not have 2 flats. It had 3. I missed it by that much. And so I played all the way through that, and I tried to catch all the right things. And the problem was I hadn't practiced it right, so the performance wasn't right. And I look back at what our truth today is: love first, so love will last. If we don't practice it right, it's not going to perform right. And so we've got to look at what's going on in Revelation chapter 2. at this church at Ephesus. So let's look at all the right things that they were doing. Revelation chapter 2, beginning in verse 1. Jesus is speaking to John. He's on the Isle of Patmos. We talked about that. Write to the angel of the church in Ephesus. Thus says the one who holds the 7 stars in his right hand and who walks among the 7 golden lampstands. Okay, that's just a description of Jesus. So now he's going to talk about the things that this church was doing right. Okay, look at, there's 5 of them. I know your works, your labor, and your endurance, and that you cannot tolerate evil people. You have tested those who call themselves apostles and are not, and you have found them to be liars. I know that you have persevered and endured hardships for the sake of my name and have not grown weary. There's 5 right things that they were doing. Let's talk about the 5 right things that they were doing. The first right thing that they were doing is works. He says, I know your works. You've been killing it in this respect. You have been working hard. All the tasks, all the stuff that you do, he said, that is awesome. You know, you're feeding the poor. You are helping the underprivileged. You are in your community. You're involved in what's going on. You are taking care of widows in need. You're preaching the word. You know, all this stuff. Man, your calendar is full. You have so many events going on at church. Your work is absolutely exemplary. That's great. You have done great at all of the works. And he said, you've done the works right. And then he says, your labor, all that you have labored to do. That word labor really means a sense of toil, like taking a beating. The labor that you have done it with, all the works that you've got, and then the labor involved in producing that. The word labor, you can go back to Adam and Eve in Genesis 3. Do you remember how God used labor and toil at that particular time? He told Adam that now you're going to have to toil and sweat over the ground that's not going to produce stuff very much. Oh, and Eve, now you're going to have trouble or labor or toil in childbearing. It would seem to suggest that taking care of the garden and having children were easy peasy. And then sin came in and he said, now you're going to labor over that. And we even call childbearing labor. Guys, you have no clue. Can I get a testimony from the lady? Yeah. The closest that I've ever heard it was by a comedian that said if you'd ever take your bottom lip and stretch it over the top of your head, you're getting close. This sense of labor that you're going to toil. And so Jesus is saying to this church at Ephesus, your labor, the stuff that you're going through, the effort in which you're doing it, man, I applaud. You have done that right. I know of your labor. I know your works, and I know your labor, that you have toiled incessantly over this. The third thing he says is, and your endurance. Your endurance. This word can be defined, your capacity to continue to bear up under difficult circumstances. Your capacity or your ability to bear up and to continue to bear, to endure, to be able to continue to go in spite of difficult circumstances. This sense of endurance is our third area that God has stated, or Jesus has stated to John about this church at Ephesus. Your works, they're wonderful. Your labors, I get it. You have gone through that, and I think you're doing a fantastic job with that. And your endurance, your ability and your capacity to bear up under difficult circumstances. That even though you're having to deal with a difficult moment and you are having to have a load on you, you're still able to take that next step. To continue to move forward in what you're doing. He said, you've done that right. You've done it right. You're bearing up. Your endurance. Weights keep going on and you keep walking. They keep adding stuff to you and you keep walking. You have one more thing you got to do, one more additional pressure, one more pain, one more problem, one more removal of your rights, and you keep going. Your endurance, you've done that right. The fourth thing that they talk about is a sense that you cannot tolerate evil people. This idea of intolerance and having a sense of intolerance. Now, we look at that word, and today, if somebody says you're intolerant, that is actually, they're saying something negative about you. That you are, well, you're just intolerant. But what Jesus is saying is, you as the church, you don't tolerate evil people. You don't tolerate it. We, as the church today, we cannot control what goes on outside. Some would say we have a hard time controlling what goes on inside. But this church, Jesus says, your works, your labor, your endurance, and even your intolerance of evil in the church, you've done that right. You don't allow gossip, and you don't allow evil thoughts, and you don't allow evil actions, and you don't allow all of this stuff. You don't allow that. When something rises up or something happens, man, you nip it in the bud and you throw it out. You say, no, we're not doing that here. We don't have that here. You may do that at your job, and you may do that at home, and you may do that out someplace else. But when we come in here, that's not what we do. We're not going to think that way. We're not going to talk that way. We're not going to act that way. Church of the 21st century could learn from this. But Jesus says, I know about all that. That is great that you have not done that. And the fifth thing is this sense of diligence, and you find that in verse 3. You haven't grown weary. You've persevered, you endure hardships for the sake of my name, and you have not grown weary. You have been diligent. You just keep going. You're the Energizer Bunny of churches. Then no matter what happens, no matter what they throw at you, you are just going to keep moving forward. You have endured this, and your diligence is being applauded, and that diligence is awesome. But have you ever done everything right only to find out you did it wrong? Because now Jesus is about to flip the script a little bit, and look what he's going to say in verse 4. But I have this against you. You have abandoned the love you had at first. You've abandoned the love that you've had at first. Your works, great. Your labor, great. Your endurance, great. Your intolerance of evil, that's great. Your diligence, great. Man, we're check marking you, that's awesome. But you're doing all of those things. You have not included love in all of these things, and I've got that against you. In fact, it puts shade on all of the good. That is it really that good? Or is it that it could have been better? Because Jesus says, look, if you don't have love, this is a problem. What would Paul say later? He would, or in another book, what Paul would say is, if you have all of these wonderful things, but you don't have love, you're just a noisy gong. You're just a clanging cymbal. You're just noise without harmony. And you're just noise without melody. If you don't have love. Love is what makes this work properly. Love is what makes this from breaking down. I'm thankful that we have a very wonderful mechanic that volunteers his time to help the preacher out whenever his cars break down. And I'm thankful to Mr. Dalby for all the things that he's helped me with. We recently got a car as my daughter's about to be of driving age. Let's just take a moment of silence right here. Okay, so we got the car, and it started to act up a little bit, and we were concerned that the transmission was bad in it, and it had all the right parts in it. But the problem was the filter had not been put on properly on the transmission, and it had been leaking transmission fluid for a long time. Slow, small, you'd never see it drip on the ground. But over the course of time, it had gotten so low that now everything was starting to act up, and the gears weren't shifting properly. And in fact, by the time I got it over to his house, I had no reverse. It's important to have enough transmission fluid so all the workings will work right. Now, to any mechanic, anybody that's aware of engine works, you're like, well, duh. Yeah. Okay, not a mechanic. You know, I recognized the need for it, didn't recognize what it would do if it got too low. I assumed something bad. So, 7 liters of transmission fluid and a new filter later. Now, we drained 3 out. It wasn't without. It was just low. But imagine what it would be if it was without. It'd be toast. Yeah, it's over. We're not driving this car. Let's just, have to go get another transmission. But when we filled it back, when we drained all the old out, and we put all the new in with a brand new filter and sealed it, now it runs just fine. So it is with the church, with or without love. If we don't have love, we don't operate. That's why you got to love first, so love will last. If we don't love first, love's not going to last. And we've got to do that. You say, well, help me understand the importance. Kind of like that transmission. It was shifting hard, but it was still driving. And then it would start flashing and quit, and then I lost reverse altogether, and it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. What happens if we don't have love first in our church? Then the works, if we go back through the 5 things, works without love, listen to this, works without love make projects out of people. We can do stuff, but without love, it's just projects. We see somebody come in, and if somebody walks in that is different than you, if somebody's sitting down that's different than you, in whatever way that you want to make up in your own mind, I could give you a list, but you've got one in your brain already. You know what is, and when they walk in, if our first thought is, oh my, somebody really needs to fix that situation. Oh, honey, hey, let me help you. Let me tell you something. We have a community of people that don't want you to fix them. They want you to love them. We've got to love first so love will last. We can have all the events, we can have all the ministries, we can have a full calendar, we can do all these things, but if we make projects out of people, we've lost our first love. We got to love first so love will last. When we begin to look at this next one and we look at all of the labors, all of this taking a beating and the toil, labor without love simply leads to self-interest and entitlement. Because we begin to think, look what I've done. Look at all that I'm going through. And all of a sudden it doesn't become about Jesus anymore, it's about me. And we say, well, hey, I've worked hard, I deserve. That's entitlement. I've been here 30 years, I deserve. I pay the bills, I deserve. We got more people attending than the other group we deserve. When we do that, labor without love just leads to entitlement and self-interest. We have to love first so love will last. This is so critical to what Jesus is saying to them. It's no surprise to me that it's the first one that he writes. If we have endurance without love, it simply leads to pride. Look what I've gone through. Look what we've endured. Look how good we are. And pride rises. Pride comes before a... Yeah. Let's say that again. Pride comes before... It does. It comes before a fall. And if we get puffed up with pride, we're going to fall. Goliath thought he was the best thing ever, but it was a rock that killed him. It wasn't a mighty warrior. It was a little boy. It wasn't somebody that could even fit into armor. It was a little boy. It wasn't a sword. It was a slingshot. But the pride that he had caused the fall. And if we have endurance without love, we're simply being filled with pride. It shouldn't be look at me, but it should be love you. Love you. If we have intolerance without love, it can lead to prejudice. Say, well, hey, we don't allow that in here. You know how easy it is to take that and begin to slide away if love is lost? If we don't love and we say, well, we don't allow this and we don't allow, you can't say that stuff and you can't do that stuff, and then it can lead to, well, you can't wear that here. Well, then, hey, you can't have that here. Well, you certainly can't bring that drink in here. Oh, whoops. We've got to be careful that we don't let intolerance run wild without love as the foundation and the base. Finally, this sense of diligence. You've endured. That's wonderful. You haven't grown weary. That's fine. That's great. But diligence without love can simply lead to isolation. You can be so diligent that you're going to find yourself on your own after a course of time if you don't have love involved in the process. Love is what makes it all work. Love is what puts it together. Love is what lets it come across in a good way. Love takes all the right things and makes them better. Love first, so love will last. And so we have to ask ourselves, love first. Love what? Love this. Love Jesus. When it was talking about you've lost your first love, there were several writers that came up with, it could be one of three things. One of three ways that, what does this love mean? What does this love look like? And this love, first of all, can look like, don't lose your love for Jesus. And that's so critical. We can't lose our love for Jesus. We can't just be about all the events and all the ministries and all the religion of it all. If we don't have Jesus, we don't have anything. And so it's important that we understand we must love Jesus. Love Jesus first. He needs to be a priority in the things that we're doing. But there's also, that's the obvious one, isn't it? Well, we have to love Jesus. Yes, you do. But we also have to love each other. What if it's a sense that even in the church at Ephesus, maybe it is that they weren't loving Jesus the way that they should, or they weren't incorporating Jesus into the works and labor and endurance and diligence and tolerance. Maybe it was also that in the process of all the things they're doing, they're forgetting to love one another too. That all of a sudden, it's like the warrior who has no war. You know, there's nations out there that were so involved in just fighting people that when there's nobody else to fight, they start fighting themselves. We as the church have to be careful that we maintain not just our love for Jesus, but love for one another also. We are to love one another. And in loving one another, we need to realize that it's love Jesus and love each other. This is a critical component of what we're doing. Love one another. Love our community is a third one. And you may be here today and love for Jesus, maybe that has diminished over the course of time. It happens. Maybe your love for Jesus isn't what it used to be. Maybe it's because all of the works and the events and the schedule and the church and all this stuff, we've flipped it and we've gotten focused on the religion and we've forgotten the relationship. The religion of it all isn't going to develop that relationship with God or with each other real well. But having a relationship with Jesus that is vibrant and alive, and a relationship with one another that is vibrant and alive and deep and abiding, when we have that, then our religious part of life will come alive. Because suddenly you have the energy that makes it work. You've got the love that makes it work. Let us not be a transmission with no fluid that starts to lose gears. Let's love first, so love will last. And in that moment, power returns. And in that moment, ability returns. And in that moment, obstacles are moved out of the way. In that moment, loving first, so love will last, will make all the difference. Focus on the love for Jesus, each other, and our community. And watch what God will do.